the twin sons of Kepler-44 to be cast their dying light across the cracked earth, painting everything in shades of rust and despair. The planet had been beautiful once. Before the great drought, before the exodus, before the last of the water dried up and blew away like dust. Zira pressed her scaled back against the jagged rock formation, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. The transport ship that had brought her here was already a speck against the amber sky, carrying her people toward distant worlds where water still flowed and gardens still bloomed. They had left her here to die, just as the council had decreed. Cursed One, they had called her, bearer of the dark marks. She touched the glowing patterns that spiraled across her arms and face, the bioluminescent markings that pulsed with her heartbeat. To her people, these marks were signs of corruption, of a soul touched by shadow. But Zira knew the truth. The marks responded to her emotions, glowing brighter when she felt joy, dimming when she despaired. Right now, they barely flickered. Like dying stars. The wind carried the scent of metal and decay across the barren landscape. This world had been stripped clean by automated mining machines decades ago, leaving behind only empty shells of cities and the skeletal remains of forests. It was the perfect place for an exile to waste away, forgotten by the universe. Zira closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice, the lullabies sung in their ancient tongue, the gentle touch of hands that had once braided flowers into her dark hair. But even those memories were fading now. Like everything else in this place of endings, a sound made her eyes snap open, a low rumble, growing louder, not wind-machinery. She scrambled higher up the rocks, her elongated limbs moving with fluid grace despite her exhaustion. From her vantage point, she could see it, a battered hover truck making its way across the wasteland, kicking up clouds of red dust. Human technology, she realized. There were still humans here, somehow surviving on this corpse of a world. The vehicle stopped near a cluster of metal debris, and a figure emerged. Even from a distance, Zira could see he was tall and lean, his movements careful and practiced. He wore a patched environmental suit and carried a scanner that beeped softly as he worked. Marcus had been scavenging the dead worlds for 3 years now, ever since the corporation had laid him off from the terraforming project. It wasn't much of a life, picking through the bones of civilization for anything valuable enough to trade. But it kept him alive, and after what had happened to his family, alive was enough. He knelt beside a twisted piece of hull plating, running his scanner. Over its surface, decent titanium content worth maybe 50 credits at the trading post. He was reaching for his plasma cutter when something caught his eye, a flash of blue-green light. There and gone again, from the direction of the rock formations. Marcus straightened, slowly, his hand moving to the pulse weapon at his hip. Pirates sometimes used light signals to coordinate ambushes, though he'd never seen any this far out in the dead zone. He activated his suit's optical enhancement and scanned the rocks. Nothing. Just stone and shadow and the endless emptiness of their movement among the crags, and another flicker of that strange light. Against his better judgment, Marcus found himself walking toward the rocks. 3 years of solitary scavenging had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him something extraordinary was hiding up there. Zira watched the human approach with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. She should run, flee deeper into the maze of stone, and pray he didn't follow. But where could she go? This entire world was a prison, and she was dying slowly with each passing hour. The bioluminescent marks along her arms pulsed brighter as her emotions spiked. Fear, loneliness, and something else, a tiny spark of curiosity about this strange creature who walked alone through the wasteland. Marcus called out when he reached the base of the rock formation. "Hello, is someone up there?" His voice echoed among the stones, surprisingly gentle. Zira had expected harsh commands, threats, violence, but there was something almost kind in his tone. She made her decision. Stepping out from behind her shelter, Zira revealed herself in all her alien otherness. Her scaled skin shifted from deep purple to silver blue as anxiety coursed through her. The marks on her face and arms blazed like captured lightning, casting dancing shadows on the rocks. Marcus stumbled backward, his hand flying to his weapon, but he didn't draw it, couldn't draw it. Because despite her utterly inhuman appearance, despite the scales and the glowing patterns and the way her large, dark eyes seemed to hold the depth of oceans, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They stared at each other across the growing twilight, to beings who should have been enemies, predator and prey, human and alien. But in that moment, Marcus saw something in her expression that transcended species, the universal language of loneliness, of abandonment, of someone who had given up hope of ever being understood. Zira descended the rocks with fluid grace, each movement revealing new wonders. Her hair moved like liquid silk in the thin atmosphere, and when she tilted her head, Marcus caught glimpses of delicate gill slits along her neck that fluttered with each breath. She was evolved for water worlds, he realized. This desert planet must be slowly killing her. She stopped just beyond arm's reach and spoke in a voice like wind chimes, words in a language he didn't recognize, but her meaning was clear enough in the way she gestured to herself and then to the empty landscape. She was alone, abandoned, dying. Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Slowly, carefully, he removed his helmet and set it aside. His brown hair was matted with sweat, his face weathered by too much recycled air and artificial light, but his blue eyes were kind, and when he smiled, Zira felt something inside her chest flutter like a caged bird suddenly remembering. It had wings. "My name is Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her and raised his eyebrows in question. "Zira," she whispered, the sound barely audible in the thin air. He nodded and took a step closer. "You're hurt," he said, gesturing to the way she favored her left side, where her scales had gone dull and gray. "Sick," she understood enough to nod. The toxic atmosphere was poisoning her slowly, and without proper food and water, she had maybe days left. Marcus looked back at his hover truck, then at the endless wasteland, then at this impossible creature, who had somehow appeared in his world like a miracle wrapped in starlight. He should leave her here. It was the safe thing to do, the smart thing. Alien contact was forbidden by corporate law, and harboring one could mean imprisonment or worse. But as Zira swayed on her feet, her glowing marks dimming further, Marcus knew he couldn't walk away, wouldn't walk away. "Come on," he said gently, extending his hand. "Let's get you somewhere safe for a moment." Zira hesitated. Trusting had led to betrayal before, to exile and abandonment. But something in this human's eyes spoke of genuine compassion, and she was too tired to be afraid anymore. She reached out and placed her scaled hand in his. The touch sent electricity through both of them, not the bioluminescent energy that powered Zira's markings, but something deeper, more profound, a connection that defied explanation. Bridging the vast gulf between their species, Marcus felt her hand trembling in his, so alien yet somehow familiar, like finding a piece of a puzzle he hadn't known was missing. Zira felt warmth spread from the contact, the first real warmth she had known since her exile began. Together, they walked toward the hover truck and whatever uncertain future awaited them in the dying light of the twin suns. Neither of them knew that their meeting had been witnessed by sensors hidden among the rocks, or that deep in space, a ship changed course and began its journey toward the dead planet, where love had just bloomed in the most unlikely of gardens. Marcus's shelter was a marvel of human ingenuity carved from necessity, built inside the hollow shell of an abandoned mining facility. It contained everything needed for survival. In this hostile world, air recyclers, water condensers, solar collectors, and a modest hydroponic garden that provided fresh vegetables. It wasn't much, but it was home. Zira stood in the doorway, her bioluminescent marks shifting from deep blue to curious amber as she took in the space. The warm, humid air from the greenhouse section made her gill slits flutter with relief, and, for the first time in weeks, she could breathe without pain. "It's not much," Marcus said, suddenly self-conscious about his simple living arrangements. "But it's safe. The atmospheric processors keep the air clean, and there's fresh water." At the mention of water, Zira's eyes widened. The markings along her throat pulsed a brighter blue-green, and she made a soft sound that might have been a question that Marcus understood immediately. "Of course, you must be dehydrated." He led her to the small kitchen area and filled a glass with clear, filtered water. Zira accepted it with trembling hands, her scaled fingers wrapping around the smooth surface. She drank deeply, and Marcus watched in fascination as the gray patches on her skin gradually regained their healthy purple-silver hue. The transformation was like watching a dying flower bloom again. Better? He asked. She nodded, then surprised him by placing her hand over her heart and bowing slightly, a gesture of gratitude that needed no translation. The evening passed in halting attempts at communication. Marcus showed her around the shelter, naming objects in English while Zira repeated them in her melodic voice, adding her own words in return. Water became aqueous in her tongue, musical and flowing. Home translated to something that sounded like distant singing. As the hours passed, Marcus noticed how Zira's appearance changed with her emotions. When she laughed at his clumsy attempts to pronounce her language, her scales shimmered with gold highlights. When she grew tired, they darkened to deep purple. And when their hands accidentally touched while sharing the simple meal he'd prepared, both their faces flushed, his with human red, hers with a rainbow cascade of bioluminescent patterns. The communication breakthrough came when Zira found his tablet computer. Her long, delicate fingers moved across the screen with surprising skill, and she quickly discovered the drawing application. Within minutes, she had sketched a remarkably detailed image, a water world with floating cities and gardens that grew beneath crystal domes. Your home, Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. Zira nodded, then drew another image. This one showed figures with her same scaled appearance, but their bioluminescent markings were different, steady, uniform patterns unlike her own chaotic swirls and spirals. She drew herself among them, but separate, marked with an X. They cast you out, Marcus said softly, because you're different. Her large, dark eyes filled with something that might have been tears, though they glowed faintly blue as they fell. She drew one more image, herself alone on a barren rock, growing smaller and smaller until she was just a dot surrounded by emptiness. Marcus felt his heart clench with sympathy. He took the tablet and drew his own pictures: Earth, green and blue and beautiful, then the same planet, brown and scarred, cities empty, oceans poisoned. Finally, himself in a small ship, leaving everything behind. We're both exiles, he said, both running from places that didn't want us. That night, Marcus set up a sleeping area for Zira in the greenhouse section, where the humidity would be more comfortable for her amphibian physiology. He gave her extra blankets and showed her how the environmental controls worked. Thank you, she said in accented English, the words carefully practiced. You're welcome, he replied, then added slowly, I'm glad you're here. Her bioluminescent markings flared bright gold at the words, and she smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her alien features seem not strange, but wonderfully exotic. Marcus was settling into his own bed when his communication system chirped. The incoming transmission was from Elena, his sister, calling from the trading station 3 systems away. Marcus, are you there? It's been weeks since your last check-in. He glanced toward the greenhouse, where Zira's soft humming could be heard, a lullaby from her water world. He activated the private channel and spoke quietly. I'm here, Elena. Sorry, I've been busy on that dead rock. What could you possibly be busy with? Marcus hesitated. Elena was the only family he had left, the only person who still cared whether he lived or died. But how could he explain about Zira, about the way her presence had awakened something in him he thought had died with his old life? I found something, he said finally. Someone, actually. There was a pause. Marcus, please tell me you haven't taken in another stray. Remember what happened with that traitor who robbed you blind? This is different. They always are. Look, little brother, I worry about you out there alone. But picking up strays isn't the answer to loneliness. After the call ended, Marcus lay awake listening to Zira's humming. Elena's words stung because they contained a grain of truth. He was lonely, desperately so. But this wasn't about loneliness. Zira wasn't a stray to be pitied. She was something else entirely. In the greenhouse, Zira sat among the growing plants, her scales gradually shifting to match the green of the leaves around her. This adaptive camouflage had once been useful on her water world. helping her blend with kelp forests and coral reefs. Here it seemed pointless, another reminder of how she didn't belong. But when she thought of Marcus's kindness, of the way he'd looked at her without fear or disgust, her markings blazed with warm colors. No one had ever looked at her that way before. On her home world, even her own family had struggled to meet her eyes, disturbed by the chaotic patterns that marked her as different. She touched the glass wall separating the greenhouse from Marcus's living space. Through it, she could see him lying in his bed, staring at the ceiling. Did he regret bringing her here? Was he already planning how to get rid of the strange alien who had disrupted his solitary existence? As if sensing her gaze, Marcus turned, his head toward the greenhouse. Their eyes met through the transparent barrier, and he smiled. Not the polite smile of someone being kind to a pitiful creature, but something warmer, more genuine. Zira smiled back, her bioluminescent markings painting rainbow patterns on the garden walls. In that moment, surrounded by growing things and breathing clean air, with a kind human watching over her, Zira felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood: hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attempts at communication, new discoveries about each other. But tonight, for the first time since her exile began, Zira fell asleep feeling safe. Neither of them noticed the distant sensor reading that flickered on Marcus's dormant monitoring equipment, indicating movement in the planet's upper atmosphere. Something was coming, drawn by the energy signatures of an unregistered alien presence. But that was tomorrow's worry. Tonight, in the shelter carved from metal and loneliness, two souls from different worlds discovered that understanding didn't always require words. Sometimes it just required an open heart. Zira collapsed on the third morning. Marcus found her curled among the hydroponic vegetables, her bioluminescent markings flickering weakly like a dying flame. Her scales had turned an alarming shade of gray-black, and her breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Zira. He knelt beside her, carefully lifting her head. Her skin felt burning hot despite its unusual pallor, and the gill slits along her neck were sealed shut, struggling against the planet's toxic atmosphere. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and dim. When she tried to speak, only a weak whistling sound emerged from her throat. The universal translator he'd rigged up the day before caught fragments, burning. Can't breathe. Marcus's hands shook as he carried her to his medical station. The diagnostic scanner beeped frantically, displaying readings that made no sense for human physiology, but painted a clear picture of system failure. Her body was rejecting the planet's environment more aggressively than he'd realized. Whatever biological adaptations had kept her alive during the first days of exile were breaking down. "Stay with me," he whispered, brushing her dark hair away from her fevered face. "I'm going to fix this." He spent the next hour frantically searching his databases, cross-referencing atmospheric poisoning symptoms with known treatments for amphibian species. Most results were discouraging. Without proper medical facilities and species-specific medicines, there was little he could do except make her comfortable while she died. But one entry caught his attention, a geological survey from the planet's early mining days mentioned crystalline formations in the deep caverns, structures that naturally filtered and purified atmospheric gases. The crystals had been deemed worthless for mining operations, but the report noted their unusual properties. They seemed to resonate with certain bioelectrical frequencies, potentially useful for life support systems. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the only chance Zira had. Marcus loaded his hover truck with mining equipment, oxygen tanks, and every medical supply he could spare. Before leaving, he knelt beside Zira's makeshift bed and took her burning hand in his. "I have to go," he said softly. "There might be something in the deep caves that can help you. I'll be back. I promise." Her markings pulsed once, faintly, and her fingers squeezed his with what little strength she had left. The journey to the cavern system took for hours across increasingly treacherous terrain. The entrance was little more than a crack in the mountainside, barely wide enough for his equipment. Marcus rappelled into darkness, his helmet lights cutting through air thick with mineral dust and strange vapors. The crystals were deeper than the survey had indicated, past chambers filled with the skeletal remains of the planet's last ecosystem. When he finally found them, Marcus understood why the miners had dismissed them as worthless. They looked like nothing more than cloudy quartz formations, unremarkable and dull. But when he activated his bioscanner near them, the crystals began to glow with the same blue-green light that danced across Zira's skin. Working quickly, Marcus carefully extracted several of the smaller formations, wrapping them in protective foam. The crystals seemed to resonate with each other, humming softly, in harmony. By the time he emerged from the caverns, his equipment readings showed the crystals were actively purifying the air around them. The return journey felt endless. With every passing minute, Marcus imagined Zira growing weaker, her light fading completely before he could return. He pushed the hover truck beyond safe speeds, racing against time and his own growing desperation. He found her barely conscious, her bioluminescent markings reduced to the faintest flicker. Her breathing was so shallow he had to watch closely to see the rise and fall of her chest. Marcus quickly arranged the crystals around her bed, creating a circle of softly glowing stones. Immediately, the air quality improved. His sensors registered a dramatic reduction in toxic particles and an increase in beneficial trace elements, but the crystals weren't enough on their own. Zira needed direct contact with their purifying energy. Taking a deep breath, Marcus carefully lifted one of the smaller crystals and placed it against Zira's throat, just above her sealed gill slits. The reaction was immediate. The crystal blazed with brilliant light, and Zira's entire body convulsed. "No, no, no," Marcus whispered, thinking he'd made a terrible mistake. But then Zira's gill slits fluttered open, drawing in the purified air. Around the crystal, her markings began to pulse stronger, color returning to her scales like dawn breaking over water. As the healing progressed, something unexpected happened. The crystal's resonance seemed to create a bridge between their minds, and suddenly Marcus could feel Zira's memories flowing into his consciousness. He saw her childhood on the water world of Valia, floating cities connected by streams of living light, gardens that grew beneath the waves, children who swam through liquid starlight. He felt her joy at discovering her unique gift, the way her bioluminescent patterns could create complex visual stories that captivated audiences. But he also experienced her pain, the growing fear in her community as her markings became more chaotic, more unpredictable, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The day the council decreed that her aberrant patterns were a sign of spiritual corruption, a danger to their ordered society. Most heartbreaking of all, he felt her family's anguish as they made the impossible choice: exile their beloved daughter, or face persecution themselves. Through the memory link, Zira experienced Marcus's past as well. She felt his love for the terraforming project, his dream of bringing dead worlds back to life. She experienced his devastation when corporate greed destroyed everything he'd worked for. When his colleagues abandoned him rather than fight an unwinnable battle, she understood his self-imposed exile, his belief that he'd failed everyone who mattered. As their memories intertwined, both began to understand that their meeting was more than chance. They were two souls shaped by abandonment and loss, finding in each other the acceptance they'd never known. The healing process took hours. Marcus remained by Zira's side throughout, monitoring the crystal's effects and adjusting their placement as needed. Gradually, her color returned to its healthy purple-silver. Her breathing became steady and strong, and her bioluminescent markings blazed with renewed life. When she finally opened her eyes, they were clear and bright, filled with wonder and something deeper: gratitude so profound it transcended species. "Marcus," she whispered in perfect English, the memory link having shared his language as well as his experiences. "You saved me. We saved each other," he replied, meaning it completely. Zira reached up and touched his face with her scaled hand, her markings painting both of them in rainbow light. In her touch, Marcus felt echoes of the love her people had never been able to give her: unconditional, transformative, healing. Outside the shelter, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and hidden sensors registered the approach of ships that had traveled far to find the lost daughter of Valia. But inside their haven of growing things and crystal light, two hearts that had been broken by rejection discovered they could beat in perfect harmony. The real healing had only just begun. The ships arrived at dawn, their sleek forms cutting through the amber sky like silver tears. Marcus stood at his observation window, watching 3 vessels in perfect formation descend toward his shelter. Their design was unmistakably alien organic, curves that seemed grown rather than built, surfaces that shifted color like living skin. "They found me," Zira whispered from behind him. Her voice held no surprise, only a deep, weary sadness. Marcus turned to find her standing in the doorway, and his breath caught. Overnight, something had changed. The healing crystals had done more than restore her health. They had awakened something dormant. Within her, her bioluminescent markings were brighter, more complex, forming intricate mandalas across her skin that pulsed with hypnotic rhythm. Her scales had taken on an opalescent quality, shifting through every color of the spectrum as emotions played across her features. She was breathtaking and terrifying in her alien beauty. "Who are they?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected. The answer, "My people, the Vahaktai." Zira moved to the window beside him, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. "They've come to take me home." The lead ship touched down in the clearing outside, its hull panels retracting like flower petals to reveal an exit ramp. Figures emerged, tall, graceful beings who moved with fluid purpose. Like Zira, they bore bioluminescent markings, but theirs were orderly, symmetrical, beautiful in their uniformity. Marcus activated his external communications array as the figures approached. Their leader, a male with silver-blue scales and markings that formed perfect geometric spirals, spoke in the same melodic language Zira used. The universal translator struggled with the formal dialect. "Honored daughter, return. Sacred bloodline, destiny awaits. They're calling you honored daughter," Marcus said. And something about sacred bloodline. Zira's markings flared, brighter, cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. "There are things I haven't told you," she said quietly. "Things I didn't remember until the crystal healing awakened my dormant memories." Before Marcus could respond, his communication system crackled to life. Elena's voice, urgent and frightened, cut through the static. "Marcus, the trading station's sensors are picking up unregistered alien vessels in your sector. Corporate enforcement is mobilizing a response fleet. You need to get out of there now." Marcus closed the channel without responding. Through the window, he could see more figures emerging from the ships, dozens of them, forming a ceremonial circle around his shelter. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in unison, creating a mesmerizing display of synchronized light. "Tell me," Marcus said. "Tell me who you really are." Zira closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they glowed with inner fire. "I am Ziranethva's Vahak, 7th daughter of the deep current, heir to the coral throne." Her voice carried new authority, ancient power awakening with each word. "My people aren't just water dwellers, Marcus. We are the gardeners of dead worlds, the awakeners of sleeping seas. My chaotic markings aren't a curse, they're the sign of a world shaper, someone who can bring life to barren places." As she spoke, her appearance continued to transform. Her scales took on the deep blue-green of ocean depths, and her markings spread to cover more of her skin, forming patterns so complex they seemed to tell entire stories in light. She was becoming something magnificent and otherworldly, so beautiful it was almost painful to look at. "That's why they exiled me," she continued. "The old bloodlines feared my power, worried I would upset their careful order. But the crystals have awakened what they tried to suppress." Outside, the Vahaktai leader raised his hands, and his voice carried clearly through the thin atmosphere. The translator rendered his words, "Princess Ziraneth, your exile is ended. The deep currents call you home. Take your rightful place among the star shapers." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. This magnificent being standing beside him wasn't just Zira anymore. She was royalty, heir to powers he couldn't comprehend, destined for a throne among the stars. What could a failed terraformer offer someone who could reshape worlds with her will? "You should go," he said quietly. "They're your people. You belong with them." Zira spun to face him, her markings blazing with sudden fury. "Belong with them? They abandoned me, cast me out to die. But you're their princess. You have responsibilities. Power. I have love," she interrupted, stepping closer. "Here with you. They offer me a throne, Marcus. but you offered me water when I was dying. They promised me power, but you gave me acceptance when I had nothing. Through the window, they could see the Vahaktai growing restless. They're synchronized. Patterns were becoming more agitated, and several had begun to approach the shelter's entrance. The corporate fleet Elena mentioned, Marcus said, if they find aliens here, there will be a war. Innocent people will die. Then we run, Zira said fiercely. Together. Where? They'll track us across the galaxy. And your people won't just give up. You're too important. The shelter's outer door chimed, someone requesting entry. Marcus looked at Zira, seeing the impossible choice reflected in her glowing eyes. Stay and risk interstellar conflict, or lose each other forever. There's another way, Zira said softly. She placed her hands against the walls of the greenhouse, and the plants began to glow with the same bioluminescent energy that coursed through her veins. I am a world shaper, Marcus. I can make this planet live again, create something so beautiful that both our peoples will want to protect it rather than fight over it. But the cost would be my royal birthright. Once I bond with this world, I can never leave it. I would cease to be Princess Ziraneth and become simply Zira, guardian of a new garden world. Marcus stared at her, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. You would give up everything, your power, your people, your throne. Zira smiled, and in that moment she was both the alien princess and the broken girl he'd found among the rocks, vulnerable and powerful, exotic and familiar, everything he'd never known he needed. I would give up everything, she said, for love. Outside, the Vahaktai had begun to sing, their voices rising in harmonious plea for their lost princess to return home. But inside the shelter, surrounded by growing things and crystal light, two hearts prepared to choose love over duty, transformation over tradition. The real test was about to begin. The transformation began with a single touch. Zira placed her palm against the shelter's central support beam, and immediately the metal began to sing. Bioluminescent veins spread from her hand like liquid starlight, racing through the walls. The floor, the very foundations of Marcus's home. Where her energy touched, cold metal became something alive, something that pulsed with the rhythm of her heart. Double quotes, Zira. What's happening? Marcus asked, watching in awe as the walls around them shifted and flowed like water. I'm giving this world my essence, she replied, her voice echoing strangely as her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, making it part of me, and me part of it. Outside, both the Vahaktai ships and the approaching corporate fleet stopped their advance, sensors screaming warnings about massive energy readings emanating from the planet's surface. Through the transformed walls, now translucent and glowing, Marcus could see the alien delegation backing away in alarm that the change spread outward in rippling waves. Dead soil began to shimmer with new life, and where Zira's influence touched, impossible gardens bloomed. Crystal trees erupted from barren ground, their branches heavy with fruits that glowed like captured stars. Streams of luminous water appeared, flowing from nowhere, fed by Zira's will and her memories of Valya's floating gardens. Princess, stop, the Vahaktai leader called through his translator. You don't understand what you're doing. Once begun, this transformation cannot be undone. I understand perfectly, Kova, Zira replied. And Marcus was surprised to hear affection in her voice when she spoke the alien's name. I'm choosing love over duty, humanity over hierarchy. Kova stepped closer to the pulsing walls of light that had once been Marcus's shelter. The council will never accept this. They'll come for you. Let them come, Zira said. When they see what love can create, perhaps they'll finally understand what they lost when they cast me out. The corporate fleet arrived with a roar of engines, sleek military vessels bristling with weapons. Their commander's voice crackled over the emergency frequencies. This is Admiral Hayes of the Terran Defense Corps. All alien vessels withdraw immediately or face destruction. Elena's voice cut through the static. Marcus, respond. What's happening down there? Our sensors are going crazy. Marcus activated his communicator, watching through the transformed walls as both fleets faced each other across the rapidly changing landscape. Elena, I need you to patch me through to both fleet commanders. Emergency priority. Marcus, that's insane, do it. Moments later, Marcus found himself addressing the species on the brink of war. "Admiral Hayes, Commander Kova, my name is Marcus Chen. I'm a civilian terraformer, and I'm requesting immediate ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. Civilian. You are harboring alien fugitives in direct violation of corporate law," Admiral Hayes snapped. "Honored human," Kova's melodic voice replied. "You have kidnapped our sacred princess. Return her immediately." "She's not kidnapped," Marcus said firmly, "and she's choosing to stay." Witness, as if responding to his words, the transformation reached a crescendo. The entire planet pulsed with bioluminescent energy, and suddenly the dead world was alive again. Vast forests of crystal trees stretched to the horizon, their leaves ringing like wind chimes in the gentle breeze. Lakes of liquid starlight reflected aurora that danced across a sky now painted in impossible colors. And at the center of it all, Zira stood transformed. She was still recognizably herself, but now she seemed to be made of living light, her bioluminescent markings covering her entire body in patterns so complex they told the story of worlds being born. Roots of energy connected her to the planet itself, making her part of the garden she had created. "This is what love builds," Marcus said into the stunned silence. "Not weapons or walls, but bridges between worlds." Admiral Hayes was the first to break. "By all the saints," he whispered, "it's beautiful." Kova's voice held wonder and grief in equal measure. "Princess, you have bound yourself to this world. You can never leave it now." "I don't want to leave it," Zira replied, her voice carrying the whisper of wind through crystal leaves. "This is home now. Marcus is home." Over the following hours, representatives from both fleets came down to walk through the transformed landscape. Corporate scientists wept at the elegant solutions to terraforming problems they'd struggled with for decades. Vahaktai artists created songs about the garden princess who chose love over lineage. Ellen arrived on the next transport, her practical engineers' minds stunned by the impossible beauty surrounding them. "Marcus, this is beyond anything we dreamed of in the terraforming project. How did you love?" Marcus said simply, watching Zira tend to a grove of singing trees. "Love did this." As words spread across the galaxy, the sanctuary world became a legend. Outcasts and exiles began to arrive, humans rejected by the corporate hierarchy, aliens cast out by their own kind, anyone seeking a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Zira welcomed them all, her garden expanding to accommodate each new heart that needed healing. Marcus became her constant companion, learning to tend the crystal gardens and speak the language of growing light. Though Zira was bound to the planet, their love continued to deepen, transcending the physical limitations of their separate species. Years passed. The sanctuary world became a symbol of hope across the galaxy, proof that love could triumph over prejudice, that beauty could bloom in the most unlikely places. Diplomatic missions replaced military fleets, and trade in art and knowledge flourished where once there had been only suspicion and fear. On quiet evenings, Marcus and Zira would walk through the gardens they had built together, watching new rivals find their place among the crystal trees and luminous streams. Zira's bioluminescent markings would paint stories across her skin, tales of their first meeting, of the choice that changed everything, of a love that literally transformed worlds. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked one night as they sat beside a lake that reflected 3 moons and countless stars. Zira smiled, her light warming the air around them. "Regret choosing love, regret building something beautiful instead of inheriting something cold?" "Never." She took his hand, and where their fingers intertwined, new flowers bloomed, hybrid blossoms that were neither fully human nor alien, but something entirely new and wonderful. Their love story became legend, whispered by travelers across the galaxy, sung by Vahaktai poets and human dreamers alike. The tale of the broken alien girl and the failed terraformer who discovered that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't technology or tradition, but the simple, transformative magic of 2 hearts beating as one. And in the crystal gardens of the sanctuary world, where outcasts became family and differences became strength, love continued to bloom eternal under alien stars.